And I'm going to admit all. Okay, welcome everyone. So this is, I believe, the 19th National Weekly Zoom series. Welcome to the Canadian Society for Organic Urban Land Care Zoom series called the Year of the Ecological Garden. My name is Julia. I'm a sole board member and I will be hosting today's session. Everyone is muted, so we can skip that. We meet every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, for 45 minutes with anyone interested in learning or sharing more about working holistically with the land. We cannot do our work without the support from Gaia College, the leading school for organic land care professional development and diploma courses. SOL's membership includes accredited professionals and certified practitioners. SOL also welcomes public members who wish to support ecological and holistic land care. If you're currently not a member, please consider joining on our website. Every month, we feature a theme that impacts our work. This month's theme is soil care and compost. We invite expert guests to talk about a topic, and then we open it up to the audience for questions. It also allows an opportunity to share best practices. Together, we can make more of an impact than we can working on our own. Please note that we record these sessions. This one is currently being recorded. Just going to admit a few more people here. We record these sessions to make them available on the SOL website. You can find upcoming monthly themes and weekly topics there as well. Feel free to share this widely with your network, and if you have a topic you'd like to hear about, please let us know. Before we get started, as a land acknowledgement, I am joining from Ottawa, the traditional unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people. It would be wonderful to see where everyone else is joining us from, so I invite you to do that in the chat box now. Our guest today is Christina Nikolic from the Organic Gardener's Pantry. Christina will be presenting on the 3 M's, mulch, moisture, and microbes versus the NPK paradigm. Christina is currently running the Organic Gardener's Pantry in Victoria, BC since 2010. Prior to that, she was operating Stewardship Natural Landscape Design, offering garden design and consultation, as well as planting service and light garden maintenance since 2003. She has a degree in landscape architecture and extensive industry training in Germany, and always felt there was something important missing. She found the answer to that something upon moving to Victoria, joining SOL, and meeting Haida and Michael Hermery. Her approach to horticulture shifted completely towards organic principles. Looking back, this has been a life-changing development, not only professionally, but personally. She is a graduate of Gaia College, a SOL certified organic land care professional since 2005, currently an instructor with Gaia College, online and in the classroom prior to COVID. So Christina, over to you and your presentation on 3 M's.
Hi, thank you, Julia. Can everybody hear me all right? I hail from the traditional ancestral lands of the Lekwungen and Saanich speaking people, and I live and work in what is now called Victoria, BC. And one of my favorite talks is on the 3 M's as opposed to NPK. I like to assure people that they can garden and have fertile soil without worrying about the numbers on a fertilizer bag. And in fact, when you look at the current political situation and the steep rise in energy and transportation costs, it would make a lot of sense to learn how to get along without the input of particularly synthetic fertilizers, but also any product that is kind of far-fetched and has to be brought in from different ecosystems. So while I run an organic fertilizer business, I also always encourage people to, first of all, establish the 3 pillars of natural soil fertility. And conveniently, they all start with an M. M as in mulch, or you could say organic matter. M as in microbes, the microorganisms and biology that degrades and decomposes organic matter and turns into plant food, and also lives in symbiosis with plants. And then moisture, because without water, we might as well be gardening on Mars. It's not happening. So these three things are easy and mostly free, or at least cheap to maintain in one's own garden without expensive imported products or trips to the garden center. And so that also means to take leave from this idea that higher numbers would mean better, would be more fertile, like a 20-20-20 fertilizer, 20% nitrogen, 20% phosphorus, 20% potassium, is not something that nature really provides in this form. It doesn't happen. It's synthetic and it's artificial. It will mostly actually get lost in the process. The plants cannot take up that much nutrition anyway. And these synthetic fertilizers not only kill soil biota, but also cause huge pollution problems in the soil, the water, and the air. So yeah, back to the 3 M's, mulch, moisture, microbes. The whole idea is that the soil is a living, functioning ecosystem, and that it takes very little for them to work perfectly in harmony. And we can do a few simple steps to support that. So the mulch, the organic matter, would be the microbe food, and that's not really difficult if you look at leaves. I always joke when I talk in class about leaves, and I think we call them leaves because we're supposed to leave the leaves in the garden. So instead of raking them off, blowing them off, seeing them as a nuisance, leaves are tree leaves, and leaves of shrubs and plants are nutritious and have to be recycled back into the soil. So between that and clippings and grass clippings, and even the bodies of weeds, or the plants that we commonly refer to as unwanted plants, can be returned to the soil as part of mulch. I have a technique that I call rip and flip, and I don't know if I invented that or stole it, but I've used the idea for a long time. I rip out a plant and I flip it on its back and I leave it on the mulch, on the surface of the soil, and it slowly dies and degrades and becomes part of my mulch. And with anything that is not a rhizome or a weed that has gone to seed, that works really well. So anything that is just green leaves can be used in mulch. Beyond that, mulch, organic matter, it's just basically what nature does, but a little more coordinated. So we use garden clippings, grass clippings, trimmings, the leaves of trees and such to deliberately cover the soil, put a green blanket on it. Some ecological and organic gardeners take it a step further and they grow a cover crop, like a green mulch, for the sole purpose of growing these plants in place and returning them into the earth where they grew when they're done, in preparation for the next planting of a crop. So, and that could also include things like, well, kitchen waste is not necessarily a good idea because of the possible problem with rats and other rodents, but you could bury bokashi compost in the ground. You could bury some kitchen waste in the ground. We create so much organic residue all around us all the time that it's really difficult not to find good mulch. One other one, a good seaweed-based mulch can be found here in Victoria and on the West Coast, anywhere you have ocean access. Some clean seaweed from the beach is usually part of my composting systems, and also I sometimes mulch with it, harvesting it respectfully in small quantities from the beaches. It doesn't mean you want to show up with a bulldozer or with a front end loader on the beach. You just take a few buckets as you need it, and only on days when there's a whole lot of it swept onto the beach after a storm. So between leaves and seaweed and all sorts of garden refuse, there's really very little organic matter that leaves my garden. And that should be the idea, is to leave as much plant material in the garden and recycling it in place for a steady flow of organic matter to feed the microbes. Now, if the microbes are lacking, they too could need replenishment. And microbes can be lacking in a system for a bunch of different reasons. They might have been starved out for lack of water because they need water to, in their own bodies to metabolize, but also to eat their food. If our mulch and our organic matter is totally dry, the microbes can't really digest it. It's very much harder for them. So they might have suffered in population numbers by drought, or maybe by the opposite. If a field or a garden was submerged with water over the winter, it would have drowned some of those aerobic microorganisms that need oxygen to breathe. They might have been negatively impacted by the past use of pesticides or synthetic fertilizers. They might have been starved of organic matter by removing all of their food, or they might just I don't know what else could be would be causing a lack of microorganisms. I'm guessing if people were in an attempt to get rid of weeds, they might have put a plastic mulch down, like a landscape fabric or a solid plastic sheeting. That too is really terrible for the soil microbiology. So in an older garden that I once lived in, I took all of that away and started mulching with leaves instead of plastic, and the soil beautifully came to life. It turned from a hard concrete, like gray colored dry substance to something that was alive, like visibly and obviously alive, dark brown, beautiful. So microbes can be reintroduced very simply with compost. That's really our best way to breed and improve microbial diversity. From local materials, pretty much all the same materials that we used for mulching anyway. And then they can also be commercially available. Things like effective microorganisms are out there. Things like mycorrhizal fungi that work in symbiosis with certain plants are available. Some of you might have used or heard about the nitrogen fixing bacteria that can be used to inoculate the legumes in the garden. That is something commercially done. And you could also look into making compost tea, or else a tea made from the soil of very healthy, ecologically vibrant gardens. For that, it needs some equipment. Good compost tea is compost tea that has been actively aerated for a certain amount of time. So compost tea does not mean sinking a sock full of manure into a water barrel and waiting 3 weeks. That creates something terrible and probably very harmful to the soil life, and definitely not healthy to have on your food plants. But good, well-made compost tea, aerobically made compost tea from super excellent quality compost with the right equipment and with a lot of oxygen in the water. That would be an excellent way to bring the microbial life into the soil. If you don't have that super perfect compost, but maybe you have access to a very healthy meadow or vegetable garden of a friend, then just scoop up a couple of handfuls of soil from that ecosystem, that soil ecosystem, and put that into your brewer. Or if you don't have a brewer, then put it in a bucket of water, take a stick, stir it like crazy for half an hour until your arms fall off, and then use that right away. That too will bring in some beneficial microbes into the system. So that covers the mulch and the microbes, right? The food for the microbes is all the organic matter you can find and pile on your garden for a constant year-round cover. And then the microbes themselves, if they're lacking for various reasons, you can reintroduce them using compost, compost tea, some commercially available products. But compost is by far the best because it's your local microbes, and compost is almost free. You just need the space and the work to do it. And then as the last M, the moisture M is something that's dear to my heart. On the West Coast, we typically don't need to worry about rain, but the drought periods in the summer have gone longer and the temperatures have risen. There were very scary fires and heat domes on the West Coast last year, and I'm expecting them to happen again this year. So microorganisms need moisture to work, and plants need the microorganisms to make their food. So if we withhold water from an ecosystem, not only do the plants get under acute water stress and therefore get more susceptible to being eaten by their predators, but also plants slowly starve because they can't rely on the microbes anymore who make their organic food from organic matter. So water is that third pillar in the 3M category of mulch, moisture, microbes. We need the water in the system to keep the whole soil food web running, the whole process of growth and decomposition, and then the many different tiers of the food chain where microorganisms eat microorganisms and eventually get eaten by animals, and the animals of course poop everywhere, and so all the organic nutrients will be recycled within the soil food web. It's a perfect system. Nature has it all figured out. We needn't worry about making it better by adding synthetic fertilizer. And in fact, a lot of our soils, for example, when it comes to phosphorus, they're not at all phosphorus deficient. But what is missing in some systems is the mycorrhizal fungi that can procure phosphorus from organic matter and rocks and make it mobile and bring it to a plant. And the plant pays back the fungi in the universally popular currency of sugar. So plants share a lot of their photosynthetic product, which is carbohydrates, with their partners that trade them for phosphorus, for nitrogen, for water, for trace elements. So this is all happening pretty much without our doing, because basically once we have the 3 M's in place, we can sit back and let nature grow our gardens. Do you want to take it from here? Do you?
Sorry, I had to find 15 minutes off. That was great, Christina. Thank you so much. So we will take some questions if you want to put your questions in the chat box for those that are listening. I have one to start. I was looking at your website the other day for someone and noticed you've got 4 different kinds of fertilizer. And I wondered the difference between the sea minerals, the liquid kelp, liquid fish, and insect frass fertilizer, and when you would use one over another. Christina, I think your video is frozen.
Sorry, you froze there, Julia, for a while. I'm afraid you have to ask your question again.
So on your website, you have sea minerals, liquid kelp, liquid fish, and insect frass. So when would you use one of those fertilizers over the other? And when, what are the differences between them all?
Really good question. So it depends on the time of season that it is. So in the spring, when the plant is making a lot of green biomass, it's the time of cell elongation and making foliage and stalks, then it needs relatively higher nitrogen content than other times of the year. So that's possibly when when liquid fish is called for, or also the insect frass fertilizer, which I'm introducing as an alternative to fish, because I'm increasingly getting a little concerned that we're overdoing our dependence on the ocean ecosystems. I don't want to keep just scooping out the fish that we know are needed in other ecosystems for our fertilizer needs. So while fish is beautiful and it works great, I'm aware that it is a resource under stress, and I would like to promote the insect frass fertilizer as an alternative. And also, even though it's not yet on the website, I will have coming onto the shelf a veganic soybean-based, organic Canadian-grown soybean-based nitrogen fertilizer with 5% nitrogen, which is really good, which is better than the fish.
Wow.
So that would be for spring. And the kelp is used, the kelp contains a relatively low amount of that NPK, which, as we already discovered, is not as important as we thought. But the kelp is a trace element fertilizer and also contains plant growth hormones. So the kelp is very useful every time you want to start a seed or plant a seedling or divide a perennial or plant a tree. Every time the plant has to produce new tissues, the kelp is important because it helps the plant with a shot of hormones to make more tissue. And then the sea minerals are kind of the icing on the cake. The sea minerals are special because the ocean has, over all those millions of years that the rivers have emptied into our Earth's oceans, has accumulated some 80 plus different elements. So almost everything that is on the periodic table of elements is actually in ocean water. And there's a company in Washington State, really close to here in Victoria, that has developed a way to get the sodium chloride out of that ocean water and to concentrate the brine down. So what I have is this concentrate that has to be re-diluted with fresh water in order to make something that is really a super load of trace elements and micronutrients. So there's 80 some different elements in there, and they would come handy at the time when the plants are flowering, setting seed, and making fruit, or making fruit and setting seed, because those trace elements, some of them might be needed in just tiny amounts at certain times of life in the plant's development, not usually so much when it's active green growth, vegetative growth, but it's mostly when it's flowering and setting seed.
Wow, those trace elements, I think that they really get overlooked in,
yes.
in conventional growing. We just think of NPK. We don't think of all those other nutrients that a plant might need at some point in its life.
Very much, very much. And the Canadian fertilizer law is not helping because it defines a complete fertilizer as something that has 24% combined of nitrogen, phosphate, and potassium or potash. And that's kind of like saying, so here's your candy bar to meet your caloric needs. And you could meet your 2,000 whatever they are
calories
thank you, by eating a number of candy bars every day, and you would not starve, but you would also not thrive. You wouldn't be healthy because you're missing all those vitamins, enzymes, trace elements. You're missing nutrition. I think the NPK paradigm is a misunderstanding of what's called important nutrients versus whole food nutrition.
Never looked at it that way. It'll be interesting to see how this growing season is impacted, because I know some farmers are already getting concerned with the cost of fertilizers, and it'll be interesting to see how many people transition away from fertilizer use and finding alternative methods to grow their crops, because it's just not going to be sustainable for long.
Yeah, I agree.
There hasn't been any questions in the chat yet. If you would like to unmute yourself to ask your question, you are welcome to, but just be aware that this is being recorded. So if you have any reservations, that's fine as well. If you put your question in the chat, I will read it out. Last week we talked about soil testing, and next week we've got what home gardeners can do in the spaces we have. So this is all going to come together, I think, at some point, because the talks are kind of building on one another this month.
Yes.
Starting with soil testing, and we learned that the conventional soil test is not as beneficial as you need, and now you're telling us that you've got trace minerals that are necessary. Not NPK, but mulch and moisture. And then next week, what home gardeners can do in the spaces they have, so we can kind of take all of this and take it to our own backyard and grow lots of vibrant fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, our food plants tend to be heavy feeders. They tend to not be content with just, a mulch of kelp, even though that makes for good soil biology, but we have to give our food plants a little bit of extra nutrition because we ask so much of them. They develop so quickly, and they produce, because that's the seeds we have been selected for, they produce these enormous, large sized and quantities of food and fruit. So they would need an extra bit of help for sure.
Good to know. I might have to get some of that C mineral fertilizer just for the extra boost. My goal is to always grow enough food to get us through part of the winter. And
wow,
never. When my kids go out and they find the beans and the peas and they eat them all, and I might be lucky to get some, and the tomatoes.
Yeah, exactly. So at least they get their fresh, raw, local food, organic. So how much better can it get? Yes. Yeah. But at the same time, need to relearn how to can and preserve and dry and salt and all these things, right?
Yeah, and
on the trucks.
We're going to need a bigger freezer. If my garden is successful as I would like it to be, we'll need a bigger freezer to freeze stuff. So I'm still not seeing any questions. If any questions come in afterwards, can people contact you? I'm just going to go back to your website here so that I can give them your proper email address. info@gardenerspantry.ca.
Yes.
So if you have any questions for Christina after this, and you can also check out her website, gardenerspantry.ca, and reach out to her there with your questions.
Yeah.
So the recording will be available on the website, and I believe the link will be emailed out to those that are registered. So that's it for today. Thank you very much, Christina.
No problem.
And thank you everyone for joining.
Okay, great. And I'll be back, I believe, on the 31st with more on fertilizers.
Yes, organic fertilizer options. Yes.
Super.
All right. Thanks,
All
everyone.
right. Looking forward to it.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.